Welcome back to KBC News Check, and thanks so much for keeping us company. And as I has alluded to earlier, is that we are now crossing over from matters politics and legislation to matters education. And the CBC curriculum has been hailed and also has met some headwinds in its implementation phase, and that is what we are going to discuss. And very quickly, to my panelists on my immediate right, we have Dr. Marunga, who is an educationist and a technology evangelist. He was going to tell us about that. And just next to him, we have Akello Misori, who is the Secretary General of Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers, KUPPET. And we have Mutheu Kasanga, who is the chairperson of the Kenya Private Schools Association. Former chair of the Kenya Private Schools Association. From the legal minds now to the education experts. And very quickly, in your opening statements, you have seen the CBC debate. Beginning with you, Dr. Has CBC, is it working? And do you welcome the task force that the president mentioned during the swearing in last week, when he said that he is going to set up a task force to review or more or less look at the CBC?
Yeah, for me, thanks, Troy. I believe that CBC is a good thing. It's basically an education formation that is going to help not only Kenya but Africa. However, I appreciate the president setting up a task force to look at some of the gaps that are still there. So that would be my short reaction to this.
And I would like to pick your mind on the same, Akello, and I will quote you talking about lack of stakeholder engagement, making things worse, affecting effective implementation of the new curriculum. So how do you welcome the reforms that the head of state talked about last week? And what would you more or less like to see? Because some parents have argued that it's quite costly. The implementation phase has been quite expensive, and especially to them. And we have COVID-19, recession, and a whole lot of challenges as well.
First, let me say that CBC is a curriculum which the best thing that ever happened to this country, and the bold step that Kenyans embraced to have it on. However, as the president has already put his mind on it, that there is a lot of anxiety. Those are the issues which we need now to be addressed. I know the team coming on board is likely to address the issues which are affecting the implementation. Remember, CBC is the implementation was phased. As I talk now, secondary schools have not had a feel of it. So, but the primary schools have had the challenge. What has been missing, which has caused a lot of anxiety, which make people think that there were no stakeholder engagement, is lack of communication, effective communication to address the issues as they are. Because in every curriculum implementation, there should be a mechanism of feedback. And I think this is where the Ministry of Education now take the blame, because they have not been explaining to Kenyans the stages where they are. The issues which are raising a lot of discomfort are not universal, because some children are very happy about it and nobody is consulting them. That is what I say, that the stakeholders are not there. But the children are very excited about CBC. Thank you.
That's a good starting point, talking about all stakeholders, including the kids who are now doing the CBC vis-a-vis the 844 system. I would like to pick your mind on the same, Kasanga, because the CBC has been hailed, and some actually during the campaigns there was even people talking about just doing away with it. Some people have talked about, let's do away with it, let's bring in the 844 and then infuse some of the things that we are having at the CBC. When I was in primary school, I did metalwork, woodwork, weaving and basketry, leather work, all these be infused. I would like to pick your mind on the same.
I think I want to agree with my colleague that going for CBC was a very bold step, and that there is no change that is painless, and that we are facing a lot of the fear we have right now is because we are at a transition point. And the old method of transitioning is not what is being used. And number two, that our education system has been stretched for a while. This has nothing to do with CBC, and he will confirm this. Our education system is stretched, full stop, and that we need to invest a lot more in education. We need to separate the issues of financing of the education sector from the issues of what happens in class. And what is happening in class is extremely exciting. In fact, today I just have a small clip, if I can, during a break, I can share with you. Because one of the most asked questions by parents, because of how the implementation is happening, is perhaps another area that we might have time, I hope we have time to discuss, is what the rural child is doing. I have a very quick, small clip, less than a minute, that I hope you can air for people to just see, that answers the excitement he's talking about the curriculum. And then Kenyans can get to see a vision of what this is all about. Because at the end of the day, we have a lot of people who don't quite understand what exactly it is. And I want to confirm this: maths is maths. English is English. Kiswahili is Kiswahili. It is how it is being delivered that is the fundamental change. But the issues of financing our education system to ensure that every child has an equal and fair slot at a well-equipped school, those are the problems we have, and they are not CBC problems. These are the problems. We see it in 844. We know every year that principals countrywide get stressed every time KCPE is announced, because they know what is coming, and it is an impossible situation. And we know that parents are rushing for a certain set of schools because these schools are seemingly well endowed. No parent will want to take their child to a school that doesn't have facilities. So the issues of education financing are very separate. And because we are going through a change, they are all merging into one thing, and the discussion is getting lost somewhere in there.
It's a good thing that you used to head the Kenya Private Schools Association,
yes.
Because something that has also come up in terms of implementation, the public schools vis-a-vis the private, which we are seeing quite a difference. And I heard a parent yesterday talk about some of the unrealistic demands by the curriculum. We have seen even memes of bring 1 kilogram of meat or bring a chicken, and some things. You are a technology expert, talking about something that will need a display, a screen, a monitor, and some people not only cannot afford, but some schools are not quite equipped in terms of the technology and in terms of the power.
Troy, let me correct something here that I think we all get wrong, including the media. So you stand accused. We are comparing CBC, which is a curriculum, with 844, which is not a curriculum.
Correct.
844 is not a curriculum.
Correct.
It's basically segmentation of curriculum delivery in terms of progression.
Correct.
It has nothing to do with CBC. So I hear very learned, educated people, including members of parliament, saying that let us scrap CBC and bring in 844. I mean, you know, and I've been here more than once, and I've spoken about this. And so even you're not taking the education that I'm giving you, because you keep comparing CBC with 844.
What we are doing...
let me just finish this point. This is critical, because if we don't get it right, then we're not going to be talking about something that we know. My friend here, Mr. Akello Misori, did A-levels, and that was a system of 7, 4, 2, 3. That wasn't a curriculum. You and I did 844. Remember what we're doing in the CBC, in the curriculum delivery now, is what we did in 844. In fact, even if you scrap the word CBC and you put it exactly in the 844 education system, it would still work. What we're talking about now, and this is for education of everyone, is the competency-based education. Competency-based education has, maybe let me just call it for the purpose of our conversation, 2 components. The component of curriculum which is a competency-based curriculum, and the component of assessment, which is competency-based assessment. So we have CBA and CBC as components of CBE, which is competency-based education, because this is going to go all the way to college. So I think we need to actually, first of all, address that, because we get the philosophy wrong. And that is what my colleagues here were saying, that communication is the problem from the ministry. And I'm really, really shocked when senior officers within the ministry run around and say CBC, I mean, including the CS himself, because I think there are also policy decisions that he has made that is causing all this anxiety for both private school and public schools. Because this thing of building CBC classroom in a secondary school, I mean, and that is why we go wrong, because we have enough money. But if we take all that money and make a wrong decision to go and build a curriculum classroom somewhere in a secondary school, and that is what the president was addressing. I think we're also not understanding what the president was. The president was saying that there is anxiety that is already brewing. There's transition that is supposed to happen in January, where some pupils are supposed to physically move to a secondary school where Magoa has built a classroom, call it a CBC classroom. And you have a standard 6 or age whatever, having to physically move there. And even from financing education, we have not even actually done that. So when you come to the issue of curriculum delivery, the issue of cost really, in my view, should not even be there. And I'll answer your question that you asked me. If we're talking of a simulation, if we want the child to see a chicken being slaughtered, the child doesn't have to go home and carry a whole chicken and bring to school so that we can actually slaughter one. That is where you infuse issues of technology, because you can actually take pictures of that and show the child in a classroom. So this issue of MPs saying that teachers are eating chicken in school and finishing all the chicken, I mean, all that kind of stuff. I mean, that doesn't arise. I mean, you can actually use technology to do that. But let us first of all correct the issue. The issue we are talking about here is competency-based education, which has the component of a curriculum, which is basically to enhance the competency, not enhance, but to extract the competency of a child, so that we know that Troy, from the very beginning in class 8 or in whichever class, he's growing to be a journalist. So let us support Troy in that angle. We know that Kasanga is good in sports. Let us support her along those lines. We know that Akello is definitely a good debater. Let us create an opportunity for him to actually explore that competency. And that's really what we're talking about. And then we actually build assessment around that. But when we continue to compare a curriculum with a number of an education segmentation, that's where we get it wrong.
Yes, and I saw you, the two of you were nodding when he was talking about, indeed, we have to separate the 844 and competency-based curriculum. These are two very different things. And some of the issues that have come about is that a lot of people don't know exactly how this system is working, including the parents and some of the teachers as well. As the Secretary General of KUPPET, were you involved in the formulation, and have you been involved? How have you been involved to this date in terms of the implementation phase? Because that seems to be the issue, and now we are going through a transition in January.
Let me first of all just pick from what he has said. You don't need to bring, if you're talking about wildlife, you don't need to bring a lion in a classroom situation so that the children or the learners see a lion. Those are the gaps which I think the media have really escalated in terms of how misinformation has now mutilated the whole debate about what we are doing in school as teachers. KUPPET was involved from day one, and in fact even some of the people who are making a lot of noise in the media have been involved. And one thing which Kasanga has said and Matunga has also brought, but they are brought out very clearly, is that we must separate issues. We cannot politicize a system simply because we don't know anything about it. We want to bring emotions, and even emotions of teachers, to discredit what they are supposed to do. In fact, let me take us back to some debate before. That quite a number of people, including those who underwent 844 curriculum system, were discrediting it. Yet I know that Kenyan graduates are very competitive, whether they are of 844 or not. What needs to be consumed currently is that we created a lot of employees in the previous systems because we wanted people to take over from the white man, and maybe to be clerks, to be teachers, to be lawyers, and so on. Now the tank is full, and we are overflowing. We have people who are coming from school, they are lawyers, they are doctors, they are teachers, and yet they are doing very basic things like commanding a border and so on. This is total wastage. Total wastage such a growing economy like Kenya should not engage in. And that's why the thought of CBC came in handy, so that we create those who can employ, those who can also create jobs. Not those people who are looking for jobs. What does it, for example, when you are at home, you have doctors who are taking procurement issues, yet we have people dying in Oslo. That means that their mindset has not been given the right concept. And that is what we are saying, that as teachers, we are dealing with issues which we have never explored, like pedagogical issues. That within the continuum of how we are supposed to teach, why are we making learning more teacher-centered than the learner? The learner now has taken charge, and we should not make it demeaning that we are asking for a kilo of sugar from each child. Even from common sense, if you have got 40 students or learners, the whole classroom will be full and there will be no space for storage. So let us not bring emotions on these issues and make it a child play in terms of what we are discussing as CBC against anything.
SJ,
yes.
Where you stand, are we ready for the transition in January?
We are not very ready for the transition for the same reason that my brother has said. That the transition, that the Minister for Education thinks that when you build the 4 walls, then you are ready for transition. I know very well that this is the kind of communication which should be there. We needed a policy framework where we are saying that we have removed categorization of schools. And therefore, if you are coming from Alliance region, the children who are coming from around that place will just feel it. Because we need to do away with the boarding schools. That is what making education so expensive for this country. We can pay more because we are thinking that if you are building dormitories, then you are ready for CBC. I know very well that some people are talking about our children are too very small, they are grade 6, they are now going to grade 8 and 7, they will be too young to be in boarding school. That is also a pedestrian way of looking at it. Because at home we have got siblings, some of them are in university, in primary, in secondary school, and their parents, they are staying in the same house. Sometimes the house is so small. The capacity of our institutions should address that kind of transition. That the teachers need to know that the category of the age group coming in are this. The goodness is that this is a phased method. Why can't they just make it? Because during my system, when I went to Form 1, I was basically 14. These ones are going there when they are 13 or 12. What is the great difference? I found people who are already 21 in school, and we lived in the same dormitory.
Yes. And Kasanga, do you think we are ready for the transition? And still, while you are at it, there has been concerns that there is a big divide between the private institutions and the public institutions, and looking at what the private can offer, and CBC being a curriculum that more or less focuses on tangible things you can see, interests, everything has to be more or less from the kids' perspective.
Okay. Let me start from that last one, where there's a perception that private schools seem to have the upper hand in this game. Can I say no, they do not? And just because everybody seems to know a few private schools that seem to be doing extremely well, that is not the picture of private schools in Kenya. The vast majority of private schools in Kenya exist in high-density urban areas. We're dealing with a lot of poverty, a lot of poverty. If I told you there are 144 private schools in Kibera, would you believe it? Did you even know that?
I didn't know that.
Exactly. Nobody knows that, and people need to know that. The vast majority of private schools operate on lower resourcing than even public schools. And for some reason, the children are, the teachers, despite a huge problem of high teacher turnover, huge problem, because these schools exist in very poor communities. Therefore, the teachers there are paid appallingly. The schools are only as wealthy as their communities. So the teachers' turnover is extremely high. And for me, I welcome the fact that now teacher training is CBC, because before, as we were rolling out in the first 4 years, teacher training was run by TSC. Now it is embedded in teacher training. And because most of the teachers in private schools are very young, young graduates from the teacher training colleges, at least now we have CBC teachers somehow. With the current upgrading of P1s, we are now at least in the market having CBC trained teachers in the primary schools. So that is a very huge misconception, that the private schools have the upper hand in this. That said, because of those problems I have just articulated, the fact that we have high teacher turnover in private schools, that for a period of time we were not accessing teacher training by the Teacher Service Commission efficiently, it does mean that interpretation of the curriculum in private schools is part of the problem we have today. It is, I can almost reveal here that half the parents who complain online probably take their children to a type of private school. And it is private schools where you wake up in the morning, bring photocopy of this, go bring and video and data at night. And this is a true indicator of the lack of training, mainly in private schools. When you look at that project of the chickens that has gone round and round and round and round, the backdrop is simple. In agriculture, rearing chicken in livestock, schools had a choice. That was the backdrop. Most schools had a feast at the end of the day, because these were the projects the children ran. Schools have kept rabbits, and you find that the ones that have kept rabbits have very, very fast reproduction, because that is the point. It is to come up with food solutions somehow. Teach students that, yes, at home we keep chickens. How about if we keep rabbits? They reproduce faster. In the same 4 months it takes to rear a chick to a kienyeji chick to adult to slaughter time, you probably have a rabbit that has born, given birth. Look at it from a food security point of view, like Bwana Misori is saying here, that we are looking to address things in our local areas, our local problems, using local solutions, looking innovative. The video I'm going to show you after the break shows children explaining how the heart operates, using locally available materials. And I don't understand why, because the other issue now is parental engagement. We as educators, those of us who are in actual schools, need to find a middle ground and understand our parents are busy and understand what our parents can and cannot do. Our parents, on the other hand, part of parental engagement is also holding schools to account. Why would a parent run around at night? Why can't they call that teacher and say, this is unreasonable, what else can you do? Why is it that our parents are happier shouting about their school in public rather than engaging the teacher and holding the teacher to account? I posit that we have still not figured out what a good CBC school looks like. In 844, it is easy. This school produced 2 children with 400 inaenda mahali. With CBC, we are still lost. But these are the true indicators of what a school that properly engages parents should be doing. It should not be forcing parents to do unreasonable things. Because the curriculum is actually pretty clear. It is very clear. These are not the things that the curriculum designs are asking of parents.
And Daktari, still on the same, looking at what the president said he was going to, in the next couple of weeks, formulate a task force to look into the implementation phase of the curriculum. What exactly would you want as an educationist to the task force. Maybe you guys might be mandated to look at that CBC because you have been in the industry for a while.
Yeah, I think the president coming up with a task force is a good thing. You've just realized that from our communication, none of us here is opposing CBC. And we didn't wake up in the same environment. We didn't call each other. I've met Kasanga before when she was chair of Kenya Private Schools. But I haven't spoken to her for over 7 years now, 5 years. Yes, Akello Misori is a friend of mine, but we just met here. But we didn't discuss this even before. So then what is the problem? The problem is, nearly every stakeholder has a role to play. We have the pupils or the learners. Let me call them learners because that's the correct classification. We have the learners who have a role to play. We have the teachers who have a role to play in terms of facilitating curriculum delivery. We have the educators and education policy and leaders and policy makers who actually, really need to actually help bring this together. And that is partly where there's also a disconnect. We have the cheerleaders, the aunties, and the guardians who are cheering our students on and all of that. But you realize that actually the main problem is communication, really helping the parents understand, the teachers to appreciate, because like everyone here is saying, the kids are excited about it. They're moving away from teach to test, memorize this, the testing is going to come, you pass, you fail. I mean, if that was the case, some of us would not even be here. Some of us are C students, some of us are C+ students, but here we are. So I think that the president coming up with a plan to help stave this, to help address this, and I think that one of the things that I want to see is the re-engineering of the correct information that needs to go to parents, needs to go to teachers, learners are basically consumers. But it pains me when I see well-knowledgeable people, and you guys even have enough courage to publish it in the papers. Say CBC gone. In fact, even there, CBC scrap or retain. I mean, and you don't even ask us, the three of us, should we retain or scrap? Yeah. I mean, it's the way that you also actually present these things, and I think that the task force is going to actually come up with the mechanism to help stave all this. We don't have to be in that task force, but I'm sure each one of us here will have an opportunity to address that too.
Secretary, I would like you to respond to the same question on what the task force should be keen to look at. And do you believe that CBC has had the goodwill from all the stakeholders, including the government?
Let me not address myself to that question in that fashion, all right, but to say that the president having said this was born out of the fact that the anxiety was there. And even people who are supposed to give CBC life started doubting it. We still have about 4 months to opening of the year 2023. And that period is too long even to adjust to the secondary school teachers who are receiving the CBC, junior secondary. I think the problem that the mandate of the task force is basically mechanical. It will not address the philosophical aspect of the CBC, but basically mechanical. Are we transiting in 2023 or not? I think that is what should concern that task force. Because in my view, it would be too expensive to scrap CBC because of the investment which has gone in it. And some people were thinking that this is something which you can just fix. It is going to cause more trouble, because one thing which must be borne is that we are trying to forget that this system of curriculum has infused 2 classes which were not there. We have PP1, PP2. These ones were not there before. Very few children were going through kindergarten schooling before they went to class 1. And the nursery school was not part of the basic education.
Correct.
Yeah. So we now have PP1, PP2, grade 1 up to grade 6. We have had 8 years of implementation. And then some people who are in charge of policy, like Parliament, is coming out and saying that when we go to power, we will scrap it. I say that one is pedestrian. This task force must deal with the mechanical aspect of this. Are we transiting in 2023? And how? That is the thinking. It requires investment, because after junior secondary, we will be going to senior secondary school, where we will have about 3 pathways. Pathways where we want now not to churn out failures, wastage, but people to go where they have the competencies, which Brother Matunga started with. That somebody should just take his football or her netball, somebody should just take media, somebody should just take law, or take technology to become an architect. Those are the pathways which are going in this. The thinking behind CBC is marvelous, and I must say, and I repeat, it was a bold step for us to be here. We are going to a future where we must be progressive, not very conservative, to learn through the A-level system, where when I came out of school, I was walking in the streets coming to Nairobi, dusting my feet and so on. We must just have job creators and employers, not job seekers. Thank you.
Indeed, Kasanga, still on the same, and let me fuse it with another aspect that has come up in terms of the adequate training of the teachers. You as a teacher, you do believe that we are well equipped, and especially now that we are headed to a transition in terms of teachers?
I want to be cheeky about this. Allow me to be cheeky. When we graduated, we were given the power to read. This is for us in secondary school. And literally we were taught all methods of teaching. Yes, in I'm 844. We were those double entrant groups in university where we were hated because the A-level guys were very smart compared to us. But us guys were very broad. But at the end of our 4 years, we were given the power to read. There's a lot, what I am seeing, and even amongst private school teachers, is a total lack of agency as well. Because if you are an educator, surely your love for learning must be surely embedded in your career. We cannot, we should be having meetings where we do professional development to discuss these things. But at the moment, the way the training is being done, literally, it's just, correct me if I'm wrong, I attended one, it was simply about the framework. Nobody talked about in detail, nicely, about pedagogy, teaching methods, and the shift from lecture method, copy those notes, students. Because we have fallen apart in 844, and we've fallen apart very far. Most teachers now just give notes, leave, give notes, leave. And you find that because our secondary schooling is selective, just the fact that you're in a cohort of bright students is what makes students pass at the end of that day. That we are here celebrating an A grade from one A grade from a district, from a sub-county school, yet we are not seeing the tragedy that a whole secondary school produces one student with an A. We are celebrating that one A student, which is fine, but we are not seeing the tragedy that this school has got so much failure because our secondary school system exists because of selection. And now we are finding pushback when we try and say a kid got 400 in a primary school somewhere in Kinanie. This is my local area. Does that mean that child can only get an A in Alliance? Why can't we equip the nearest secondary school to fit this child? After all, the parent is so poor, even the fare for going to Kakamega, to a national school there, is a problem. Is this the only way to build citizenship? CBC actually has a whole component on building citizenship. And we get laughed at when we do community service. The whole country laughs at kids when they're doing community service. How else are we going to instill citizenship? Don't throw things as you drive past. don't pick up, you know, how else other than through the education system? Yet we get laughed at and compared to Japan, where kids apparently are doing technology. Yet Japanese children clean toilets in their schools. They do community service. How is it that then we are beating ourselves so hard when a system is finally trying to bring back the brokenness of our society and bring it back as part of the duties of a citizen? If you look at the citizenship component of CBC and look at it objectively, it is that desired citizen that everybody admires from Rwanda. I hate quoting Rwanda. Rwanda is the size of Kitui County. And to me, we should be comparing, Rwanda should be like Singapore. If you know, when you look at it size-wise, okay? But this is their sense of what CBC, some of the smaller things that are totally uncelebrated, like he's saying, that get the system beaten down in public perception. Our towns are not clean. Our areas are not clean. Our small areas like this in the rural villages are not clean. How are we supposed to instill a sense of belonging to children and make them understand that plastics are not good for our environment? Climate change, if we don't do community service. Value-based education, values. We all know in secondary school we cannot even hide. In boarding schools we have problems. And we see them. This is the second term, we've had, I think, 2-3 fires.
Yeah.
Forever. I think it's because of the COVID terms.
I think what you guys have raised are very pertinent issues.
Correct.
And a lot of people are not looking at issues the way you guys are looking at.
Yes. And look at it this way. A lot of the fears parents are having are actually about kids going to boarding schools. Because the public perception is that our boarding schools, especially boys' schools, are dangerous places for young children to go to. And they are partially correct. And I agree with him. Which other better method is it that we can use to start dismantling this edifice of boarding schools that Kenya has the highest of in Africa? No other country has a boarding school network like we have here. No other country in Africa has a boarding school network like we have here. What purpose does it serve? It serves to feed into the notion that bright kids must be put in specific schools. What about the kid who emerges later in life? How many times have we seen a child who is disadvantaged by the exam system? But somehow unamkuta ana lecture huku. Amefanya certificate, diploma, degree, na kafanya masters, na kafanya PhD. Yet that child was rejected by the education.
All right. And still on the same, let me hear what Doc has to say in regards to that. Something that you can identify very well with.
Let me give my personal examples. I have a brother, my fourth follower.
And because of the interest of time,
I'll make it brief. He got a D+, went to India, came back, he did his masters at JKUPPET, just passed his PhD. He's now lecturing. But would he have been
D+?
Yes.
Would he have been admitted at JKUPPET?
Never.
With a D+. My own daughter, I removed my own daughter from Alliance Girls. I mean, which normal parent would do that? She's now in her third year at USIU, but in an exchange program in France. But she was failing. I mean, I was being told D, whatever, and the girl was being frustrated. And she was being demoralized, and she was almost moving into depression. These are my own personal examples. I'm here, I've been in the education space for over 20 years. But I had to gather the courage to remove my own daughter from boarding school.
All right, and just because of the interest of time, some parents have argued that in as much as they love it, it's a little bit expensive in terms of the resources that they have to
put. Why Jamambo are expensive one? I mean, there is nothing expensive about CBC if we approach it properly.
All right, let's
not bring in money when we are talking about education, because we'll always have money. Where did we find money to build all these 20,000 classrooms? Well, you talk about
let me just finish by saying that if we think that education is an expensive venture, let us try ignorance.
Yes.
Education can never be a cheap affair. And if we want to build a very strong foundation, we must invest in education at whatever cost. And I think the president is right to say that let us have a debate on this.
Kasanga, as we wind up.
As we wind up, I welcome the task force, and I hope it captures, some of the distinctions of sentiments. And I'm sure some of the people crafting perhaps the TORs are already aware that a lot of things have already been discussed. It is communication that we are lacking. It is the mechanics of how we are going to move on. I want a quick solution to be found. I find that I think I have a quick solution. The Supreme Court banned CDF. Why can't that whole budget that was there be put under education? And we say this is how we are going to upgrade our district schools to look like Alliance.
You'll get into problems.
I know, because the MPs want it very badly back, and I know they might. But
they are radical solutions. They are good solutions.
They can also run that project, and we ring-fence the money for education.
Okay.
It is doable. We have, like he said, the money is there. We just need to allocate it. It is there.
All right.
Yes.
Doc, to Malaysia, and please tell us what an technology evangelist is.
One thing that I always do is that I have an interest in education. And so what I do is that I bring issues, I'm a technologist, so I'm in computer science. One thing that I've done for the last 20 years is to look at how do we infuse and integrate technology in education, in curriculum delivery. And so that's what I'm preaching. That's what I talk about. And partly that's why you call me here most of the time.
Yeah.
So being an educationist, yes, but bringing in technology into that space. But in my other life, I'm also a preacher. But this time I'm preaching technology.
All right. Thank you so much for even clearing that up. We have been talking with education experts here, and you do remember the president talked about setting up a task force to look into the CBC, its implementation. Remember that beginning January, we'll be having the first big transition in terms of the CBC. I have been with Dr. Marunga, who is an educationist and also a technology evangelist. Just next to him is the Secretary General of the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers, Akello Misori. Thank you so much indeed for making time. And we have the immediate former chairperson of the Kenya Private Schools Association, Mutheu Kasanga. We're trying to put things into perspective, and indeed thank you so much for helping us unpack that. And one thing you've talked about is let's involve the stakeholders. Who are the kids themselves? An interesting one. Thank you so much, and thank you for watching. My name is Bentro Njue. Thank you. But now I'm handing over the baton to the Swahili desk that will be handling Tamrini and Kurunzi Mashinani. Thank you so much for watching. Let's continue the conversation on social media.